Hi everyone, welcome back to Azure Content YouTube channel. This is part 2 in Python real-time scenarios playlist. In this video, we will learn another Python programming by doing hands-on demo and writing the code from scratch. So for the scope of this video, we will learn how to create an expense tracker using Python. So on a day-to-day basis, we spend a lot of amount in some or the other ways, and we usually tend to forget where we have spent the amount. So we can try to replicate this scenario by writing the Python programming, and we want to track our expenses so that we will come up with a certain limit that if we cross this limit, I want to get a warning saying that I have exhausted the limit of this much amount, and it is like a warning so that you can spend less in future. Okay, so this is the use case. I want to create a chat kind of experience where the code should ask me or the any user if you want to add expense or not. If the user enters yes, then it would ask for the item on which we have spent the amount and what is the amount that we have spent. Okay, and this loop continues unless and until the user says no, I don't want to track down any further expense. That's all I want to track. And once the user says no, the loop should come out. So till the point user say yes, it should keep on tracking the items on which the user has spent the amount, and it should also calculate the total expenditure. You can see 2500, then 6000 and 1000 is coming up to the total of, let me go further, it's coming up to the total of 9500, and it has been calculated by the Python code, and it is printing the total amount here, and it's also checking if it is within the limit of 10,000. In my case, I'm taking 10,000 as the upper limit. If it is within the limit, it should print me this message that the total expenses are within the limit. And suppose if the total expense has gone out of the limit, then the use case should be, let me show you this another image. So suppose the total is more than 10,000 rupees, then it should give the user a warning that the total expense has exceeded 10,000. So this is what I have to write as a program, and also I want to get all these items along with the amount into a txt file. So it would look like this. So you can see in the expenses.txt, I have tracked down all the items as well as the amount spent on these items and the message that we got, whether it is within the limit of 10,000 or it has exceeded the limit. So I want to track it within a txt file. So basically we have to perform a write operation onto a txt file. Okay. So all these things we have to achieve by writing the program. So let me go to Visual Studio Code and let me create a file here, a Python file. Let me name it as expense tracker.py. Okay, and we would be writing the code from scratch. So first of all, let me create a variable that will be storing all my expenses details. So what all expense details I want to add? Of course, I want to add the item name and the amount spent. Since I want to track the expenses, it can be multiple items that that the user wants to enter and multiple amount as well. So the data type of this variable would be list type. So let me create a list type of variable and I will name it as expenses, and let me create an empty list, and inside this list I want to track all the items as well as amount in tuple format. So suppose the user would enter the first item as movie and the amount spent for movie is say 2500, then it would be coming inside tuple. And suppose the next item is say shopping and the amount entered is say 5000, it should be appended inside this list itself. Okay, so how much ever expenses user wants to enter, it should be able to add it into this variable called expenses. Okay, so let me comment this out just for your reference, and let me again create this expenses variable with empty list. And now I want to start a loop so that we can track the expenses in a loop fashion, because it's not only a single expense by the user. You can see this is the first iteration of the loop and the loop continues, and this is the third iteration, and in the fourth iteration the user says no, and the loop should break and we should be coming out of the loop. Okay, so till the point user say yes, the loop should continue and it should enter the item and the amount into the list, so that we can also calculate the total amount that the user has spent. Okay, so I would start the loop. I will use while loop here, and I will say while true. Okay, so the loop will start from here and it will continue, because we have specified the condition as true. So it will always continue unless and until we explicitly break the loop. Okay, so when we will break the loop, when the user will enter no, at that particular time we will write break out of this loop. Okay, so to decide whether the loop should continue or break, we have to take the input from the user itself. So for that, we have something called input in Python, where you can take the input from the user. So if you see, it's a function which reads a string from the user. Okay, from the standard input, it reads a string. So so let me comment everything out so that you can see how input works. So I will just write input and uh, tell me your name. Okay, and let me save it and let me run this Python file. So you can see it is asking tell me your name, and I can enter my name here. Okay, so this is how input function works. Okay, so let me clear this and let me remove here and let me uncomment everything except this one. Okay, so I want to take input from the user and I want to ask the user whether you want to add any expense or not, and I will also prompt the options here, yes or no. Okay, so let me write as add expenses and let me give option to the user, yes or no. Okay, so this is what will be prompted here in the terminal for the user to add their input. Okay, so now the user will say either yes or no. So depending on the user input, we have to decide what we have to do as an action, what we have to do here. Okay. So basically we have to compare the user input with yes or no. If it is yes, then we will continue tracking down the expenses. If it is no, then we will break out of the loop. So to do this comparison, of course, we will use if statement. If this output is yes, then do this, or if it is no, then do that. Okay. So let me store this user input into a variable. I will say user input equals to this one. Okay, now I will compare with this variable. If it is equals to yes, then I will continue adding the expenses. If it is equals to no, then I will break out of the loop. Okay, so of course here I will use if condition to check if user input is equals to yes. Okay, let me keep it in a string. If it is equals to yes, then what we will do, we will get the item name and the amount from the user itself. So again we will use input here. Okay, so let me use item variable, and inside this variable we will store the item name which we got from the user. So we will ask the user enter the item name here, and we will also ask the user to enter the amount. Okay, so input, and again we will say enter amount to the user. Okay, and if you notice, the item will be of type string. So here you can see single quotes. So this is of string data type, and input is compatible with string data type. You can see read a string from the standard input, but it is not compatible with other data types, that is integer or floats. But the amount will be of integer data type, or maybe the user wants to add some float data. Okay, So for amount, we want to do a data type conversion here for with float. Okay, so I want to convert it to float data type, and now the amount will hold float. Okay, so we are good till this point. Now, once the item and amount is given by the user, we want to append it into this list variable, right? Because for now, suppose the user has added movie and 2500 into the list for the first iteration. Now, when it comes to the second iteration, I want to append it into this list. So, to do that, what I want to do is I want to append to this list called expenses, and here you can see the first option coming here is append. Okay, so in this append function, we want to pass item and the amount. Okay, so now this list will be appended with the first expense details in the first iteration, and then it will be appended by the second expense details in the second iteration, and so on. Okay, so this is the case when the user inputs yes, and suppose if the user inputs no, then what we have to do is, let me use elif, which means else if condition, and we will check if user input is equals to no, then in that case we have already talked about, you can guess it, we have to break the loop. Okay, so we will come out of the loop. And is there any other scenario? Suppose the user enters anything apart from yes or no, then what happens? This code will fail. Basically, it will throw an error. So let me try to run till this point so that you can see what happens if the user enters something else apart from yes or no. So suppose if I enter yes, the item is suppose movie and amount is 2500, and it is throwing error here itself. I was not expecting that. It says list.append takes exactly one argument. Okay, so here in line number 10 we have made a mistake. Instead of two different arguments, we want to append the whole tuple in this list, right? So I will just add another bracket so that it will be treated as a tuple instead of two different variables that we want to append in the list. Okay, so now if I try to run this again, so if I say yes, I say movie and give amount, and you can see now we are not getting any error and the loop is continuing, and I'm saying shopping and amount is 5000, the loop is still continuing, and if I say no, the loop is exited, and we have come out of the loop and it is working well till now. And now we wanted to check if we enter something apart from yes and no. So suppose I want to enter something else which doesn't make sense, so you can see what is happening, it is still continuing the loop. Okay, so I'm good with that. I can continue the loops so that the user is able to enter the item in the next iteration. But with that, I also want to showcase a message to the user that the input that you have provided is invalid. Okay, so in that case I will use else statement here, and I will say print the entered value is invalid, please say yes or no. Okay, so that's it. Now let me give something here and let me come out of the loop, and now this time if I add something apart from yes or no, it says the entered value is invalid, please say yes or no. So now the user understands that he has to say yes or no. Okay, so now the loop will continue unless the user says no. Okay, so we are good with the loop. Okay, and I can also write continue. By default anyways it is going to continue, but I'm just writing for the understanding. So it is going to continue the loop if the user enters something apart from yes or no. Okay, and now out of the loop what we have to do is, we have got the list here after doing the iterations. So now suppose the user enters two values here, that is movie and shopping, and these are the items. So now what is the next step? We want to calculate the total amount here, and we want to sum these amount, and then we want to say whether the total amount is within the limit of 10,000 or not. Okay, so we have to make that check, but before that we have to calculate the sum. So let's create another variable called total, and in this variable we will have the sum of the amount entered in all these iterations by the user. So of course we have to use loop inside the sum function itself, so that it calculates the amount in each of the iterations provided by the user. So here we will say sum of what value. We have to use the sum of amount, right? So it is stored in the amount variable, and sum of amount for, I will say, item comma amount in expense list, right? So in this list we are going to use for loop, and in this for loop we are going to take only amount variable to use for the calculation of total expenditure. Okay, so and so here if I try to print the total amount, say total expenditure, and here if I give this variable total, it should show me the total of all the values that is entered by the user. So let me test it out. Okay, so here if I say yes, I will say movie 2500, and then I say yes again, I will say shopping 5000, the same example I'm taking, and then I'm coming out of the loop, and it says the total expenditure is 7500. So you can sum it up, and it's coming correctly as 7500. So this is working fine. And now the next step is to make a check or validate whether the total amount is greater than 10,000, then print the warning saying that the total expenditure has crossed your limit. Okay, so again I will use if condition to check if total is greater than 10,000, then we just simply need to print, we want to print warning, the total expenditure has crossed the limit of 10,000. Okay, so this is the message that we want to give to the user. Or if it has not crossed 10,000, then we just want to showcase that the total expense or expenditure is within the limit. Okay, 10,000. Okay, now we are good. It would be printing this message if the total expenditure is more than 10,000. So let's try it out. Let me clear the terminal and let me try this. Say movie 2500, yes. Shopping 5000, no. So you can see it is working fine. It is giving me the total, and it is also giving me the print statement here. Okay, but I also want to get all the summary of the item and the amount. So I don't want to go through all the conversations that the user had with the code, and I just want to have a summary of all the expenditure made by the user. So before the total expenditure, I want to see the list of all the items and the amount that has been spent by the user. So before this total expenditure, okay, let me use a for loop so that we can iterate through each of the items or each of the tuples within this list. Okay, so I will say for item and amount in this list called expenses. Okay, so I'm trying to iterate through the tuple present in this expense list, and then I want to print the item and then semicolon and amount. Okay, so I want to get the output in this way. So here you can see in this example, I want to get the item name and the colon and then the amount, and similarly it should give me the whole set of expenditure in this fashion, and then the total expenditure in this format. Okay, so in order to get the output in this way, I want to print the expense details here before the for loop. So I will say expense details. Okay, So let me just decorate it like this. Okay, and then and now inside this for loop, let me print the item. So let me use curly braces here, item, and then let me print the amount. Okay, after separating by colon here. Okay, so if I use this, let me see how it looks like. So let me clear this and let me give the same input here, movie and shopping. Okay, and let me break it out. So now you can see how the output is coming like. So you can see this is treating it as a string and it is not um, getting the um, value stored in this particular variable. Okay, it is just printing item and amount as it is. So in order to get the value for this variable, instead of just treating these placeholders as a string, we can use something called formatted string. So if we use F character here before quotes, it would treat it as a formatted string and it will give the output as the value for this variable and it will give the output in this format. Okay, so now if I run this and you can compare the output, I'll just give the same user input here for movie and shopping just for simplicity, and I will break out of the loop by saying no. And now you can see it is giving me the result in the right structure. Okay, and it is giving the correct value as well. Okay, so this is what I wanted to get as the output, and now I want to instead of getting this output in the terminal, I want to print it in the text file. So what I will do is I will take the whole thing here from this to this value, and before this I will create a file. Okay, so in order to create a file or in order to open a already existing file, there is something called open function. So we can write with open. Okay, and you can check online. This function is a built-in function and it helps to open a file and return a corresponding file object, and you can see the input is required as the file name and then the mode in which you want to open this file. So either it can be a read mode or it can be write mode or it can be append mode. So if you want to just read the content of the file, then you can use R character. If you want to write something in the file, then you can use W. If you want to append in the already existing file, then you can use A, and there are other modes as well. So for our requirement, we want to use W because we want to write into the file the expense details we want to write into the file, right? So here I want to give the name to the file. So suppose I want to give the name as expense tracker dot txt. Okay, so this is the name, and then I want to give the mode here, right? So either I can give R or we can give W. So in our scenario we want to write into the file, so I will give W here. Okay, so let me just give W, and now everything that we have here, let me use a tab so that it will come inside this with a proper indentation. Okay, so now instead of printing these details in the terminal, I want to write these details in the file. So instead of print, we will use write function on top of this open operation. Okay, so let me give an alias to this, say file. Okay, so with open as file, and then instead of print, I will write file dot, and now you can see file dot write operation is there, and this write method will help us to print whatever is there in the file itself. Okay, so instead of print I will use file dot write everywhere wherever I have print here, which was able to print everything in my terminal. So instead of printing in my terminal, I want to print in the file itself. Okay, so let me write file dot write everywhere wherever it is having print. So let me write file dot write, and here as well file dot write. Okay, so we are good now. We would be able to track our expense in the expense tracker.txt file. Here you can see the file does not exist as of now, but once we run this code, it will create this particular txt file and it will store all the expense details in the file with the warning or this message, okay, if it is within the limit or if it has exceeded the limit according to the user input. So now let me run this expense uh, tracker.py file and I will say yes, and I want to track down my expense for movie and for shopping, and let me give another one, say travel, and let me give it as 6,000. And now let me break it. So what it says is write takes exactly one argument, okay. So the error is coming for line number 24. So you can see here we are trying to put two arguments in file.write, which is not correct. So instead of this format, what we can do is, as we have already used the placeholder format, so I will be using the same here. So that format is working in terminal, but here the write method expects only one single argument. So instead of that, we will be using formatted string again, and as we have done for item and amount, we are doing the same thing here. We are trying to use the placeholder instead of using the variable as it is, okay. So we are good now. Let me try to clear the terminal and try to again run the expense tracker.py file, and amount let me give as it was. Let me go for shopping, and then let me have travel and come out of the loop, and now we are done, okay. So you can see we are not printing anything in the terminal, but it has created the expense tracker.txt file, and if we see here, it is tracking down the expense details. But only thing we have missed is we have not given the proper new line here. So let me give the new line in everywhere. So before this, let me give new line, and here as well for every item and amount I'm going to add a new line, okay. So everything that we are printing will have a new line for better visibility. So let me clear and run it again, expense tracker.py, and same expenses I'm going to track, say shopping 5,000, travel 6,000, no, okay. Now let's check the expense tracker. So you can see it is coming in a very readable format, and you can see movie is this much, shopping is this much, travel is this much, and total expenditure is this much, and you are also getting the warning that the total expenditure has crossed the limit of 10,000. So this is what we wanted to achieve using Python code. So please try to do practice by your own and uh, have try to have more knowledge about coding, and be more comfortable with writing the Python codes, and do not copy and paste from online. I know we have a lot of content now, and we have AI as well that will write your code from everything from scratch. You don't have to even write a single piece of code. But if you want to learn, you always have to go deep inside it, and you have to write by your own so that you can practice and become expertise in any of the skills. So please, I would recommend you to write the code by your own from scratch so that you can understand each and every character present in the code, so that you won't miss why we are writing F here, and why there is black backslash, and what does it mean in coding. Everything you will be able to know once you start writing the code, okay. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you find this video helpful. Please hit on like button and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.